What happens when two of television's most beloved personalities collide in a way nobody saw coming? The cameras were rolling, the audience was packed, and what started as a simple cooking segment on the Kelly Clarkson Show turned into one of the most explosive moments in daytime television history. Guy Fieri, the mayor of Flavortown himself, walked onto that stage with his signature energy. But what unfolded next left everyone in the studio absolutely speechless. Before we get into exactly what went down, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me which celebrity chef you think would win in a debate. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this one, because what Kelly said next changed everything. The show opened like any other episode. Kelly Clarkson, America's sweetheart with that powerhouse voice and infectious personality, welcomed the audience with her usual warmth. The segment was supposed to be a fun cooking demonstration, where Guy would whip up one of his famous dishes while trading jokes with Kelly. The producers had planned it as a feel-good moment, the kind of content that gets shared across social media with heart emojis and laughing faces. Guy walked out in his signature style, spiky bleached hair catching the studio lights, his flame-covered shirt practically screaming for attention, and those wraparound sunglasses perched on top of his head like a crown. The audience erupted in applause. This was supposed to be easy, fun, entertaining television. Kelly started with the usual pleasantries, complimenting Guy's latest restaurant venture and asking about his family. Guy responded with his characteristic enthusiasm, his hands gesturing wildly as he described his newest barbecue joint in Nashville. Everything seemed perfectly normal. They moved to the cooking station where Guy had prepared ingredients for his famous trash can nachos, a dish that had become legendary on his show, drive-ins, and dives. He started explaining the process, layering tortilla chips, pulling apart slow-cooked pork, describing the blend of cheeses with the passion of someone discussing fine art. That's when Kelly made her first comment. She picked up one of the tortilla chips, examined it under the studio lights, and said with a laugh, "You know, Guy, I've always wondered something about your food. It's all so over the top. So much cheese, so much meat, so many layers. Do you ever think about, making something that doesn't require a cardiologist on standby?" The audience laughed. It seemed like typical daytime television banter, the kind of gentle ribbing that happens on these shows all the time. But if you watched Guy's face closely, something shifted. His smile tightened just a fraction. His eyes, previously crinkled with genuine joy, hardened slightly. He let out a chuckle, but it didn't quite reach those eyes. "Kelly, Guy said, his voice still friendly, but with an edge that hadn't been there before. "That's what I love about FL. We don't apologize for flavor. We don't count calories. We celebrate food. Real food. The kind that brings families together and makes memories." Kelly nodded, still smiling. But she didn't let it drop. "Oh, I totally get that. Food should be enjoyed. Absolutely. But come on, there's a difference between enjoying food and you know what you do. It's like every dish is a dare. How much can we pile on before it stops being food and starts being a spectacle?" The audience's laughter was more uncertain now. Some people were still chuckling, but others were starting to sense the shift in energy. Guy's hands, which had been moving constantly as he assembled the nachos, stopped. He set down the cheese he'd been sprinkling and turned to face Kelly directly. "A spectacle," Guy repeated, his voice quieter now. "Is that what you think I do? You think I've spent the last 2 decades traveling this country, highlighting mom and pop restaurants, telling the stories of people who pour their hearts into their cooking just to create spectacles?" Kelly's smile faltered. She clearly hadn't expected this reaction. "No, Guy, that's not what I meant. I just mean your style is very, maximalist. It's a lot. And that's fine. That's your brand. But not everyone connects with that. Not everyone connects with that." Guy echoed, nodding slowly. "Right. So what you're saying is my food, the food I grew up with, the food that millions of Americans eat and love and celebrate, isn't good enough for your refined palate?" "I never said that," Kelly protested, her voice rising slightly. The audience was dead silent now. You could hear the hum of the studio lights. "I'm just saying there are different approaches to food. There's nothing wrong with wanting something lighter, healthier, more, sophisticated." That last word hung in the air like a grenade. Guy's jaw clenched. He took off his sunglasses from his head, folded them deliberately, and set them on the counter. When he spoke again, his voice was measured, controlled, but loaded with emotion. "Sophisticated," he said. "There it is. That's what this is really about, isn't it, Kelly? You think what I do isn't sophisticated. You think diners and drive-ins and dives. You think the people I spotlight, the cooks working 16-hour days to keep their family businesses alive. You think they're not sophisticated enough. You think American comfort food, the food that's been passed down through generations, isn't worthy of respect because it doesn't come with a foam and a microgreen and a pretentious description on a menu that costs $200 a plate. Kelly's face flushed. That's not fair, Guy. You're twisting my words. I respect what you do. I respect all food. I'm just saying there's room for different perspectives. Different perspectives? Guy shot back. Is that what we're calling food snobbery now? Different perspectives. Let me tell you something about perspective, Kelly. I've been to over 2,000 restaurants in this country. I've met people who wake up at 4 in the morning to make their grandmother's biscuit recipe. I've seen families who risked everything to open a restaurant that serves their culture's food to a community that might never experience it otherwise. I've eaten in hole-in-the-wall joints that serve food that would make you weep with how good it is, how much love is in every bite. And you know what? Not a single one of them apologized for using butter. Not one of them worried about being sophisticated enough for people like you. The audience gasped. This had gone from awkward to confrontational in a matter of seconds. Kelly stood up from her chair, her own emotions clearly rising. People like me. Kelly's voice cracked slightly, a mix of anger and hurt. What exactly does that mean, Guy? What are you implying? That I'm some kind of elitist because I asked a question about nutrition because I dared to suggest that maybe, just maybe, we should think about what we're putting in our bodies. Guy crossed his arms over his chest, the flame pattern on his shirt, seeming somehow appropriate for the fire this conversation had ignited. You want to talk about what we put in our bodies? Fine, let's talk about it. You sit here in your studio with your team of nutritionists and personal trainers and meal prep services, and you judge the food that regular Americans eat. You know what most people can't afford? They can't afford organic kale at $15 a bunch. They can't afford to shop at farmers markets where a single tomato costs more than a whole meal at a diner. The food I celebrate, the food I champion, that's real food for real people who are working real jobs and trying to feed their families without going broke. Kelly shook her head vigorously. That's a false dichotomy, and you know it. You can eat healthy without being wealthy. There are plenty of affordable options that don't require drowning everything in cheese and deep frying it. And honestly, Guy, promoting the idea that healthy eating is elitist is dangerous. We have an obesity epidemic in this country. Heart disease is killing people. Diabetes is skyrocketing. And yes, a lot of that has to do with exactly the kind of food you celebrate on your shows. The audience was completely transfixed now. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a genuine ideological clash playing out in real time. Guy leaned forward, his voice intense. Don't you dare put that on me. Don't you dare blame me for systemic issues that have nothing to do with whether someone enjoys nachos on a Friday night. You want to talk about health? Let's talk about the mental health crisis, the loneliness epidemic, the fact that people are more isolated than ever before. You know what food does? It brings people together. It creates community. It creates joy. And yeah, maybe it's not always a spinach salad. Maybe it's fried chicken or pizza or a big messy burger. But you know what? Those moments of connection, those memories around a dinner table, those matter too. They matter just as much as counting macros and obsessing over every calorie. Kelly stepped closer to the cooking station, her hands gesturing emphatically. Nobody is saying don't enjoy food, Guy. Nobody is saying don't have community or connection or joy. But there's a responsible way to talk about food, especially when you have the platform you have. Kids watch your shows. Families watch your shows. And when you act like nutrition doesn't matter, when you mock the idea of eating vegetables or caring about your health, you're doing real damage. You're making it seem uncool or unsophisticated. Your word, not mine, to actually care about what goes into your body. I have never, not once, mocked eating vegetables, Guy countered, his voice rising. I cook with vegetables all the time. I use fresh ingredients. I highlight restaurants that grow their own produce. But I also don't demonize butter or cheese or meat or any of the ingredients that humans have been eating for thousands of years. You know what I mock? I mock the idea that food should be joyless. I mock the idea that you need to feel guilty every time you eat something that tastes good. I mock diet culture that makes people, especially women, feel like their worth is tied to their pants size and that every meal is a moral decision. Kelly's eyes flashed. Don't you dare try to make this about feminism or body positivity. This isn't about guilt or shame. This is about information. This is about being honest with people about the choices they're making. And yes, Guy, when you pile 3 lbs of pulled pork and a gallon of cheese sauce onto a plate and call it dinner, you are making a choice. You're choosing spectacle over substance. You're choosing views and clicks over actual responsibility to your audience. Responsibility to my audience. Guy's voice dropped to a near whisper, but somehow it carried more weight than when he'd been shouting. Let me tell you about my responsibility to my audience. When the California wildfires destroyed entire communities, I was there. I cooked thousands of meals for first responders and families who'd lost everything. When the pandemic shut down restaurants across this country, I raised over $20 million to help restaurant workers who couldn't feed their own families. I've used my platform to highlight businesses owned by people of color, by immigrants, by people who've been overlooked by the food establishment that you seem to think is so important. So don't lecture me about responsibility, Kelly. Don't you dare. The audience erupted in applause, but it was scattered and confused. Some people were clapping for Guy, others looked uncomfortable, and a few were clearly on Kelly's side. Kelly waited for the noise to die down, her expression hard. That's wonderful, Guy. Truly, the charity work you do is admirable. But that doesn't mean you get a free pass to promote unhealthy eating. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive. You can be a good person and still be wrong about this. Wrong about what exactly Guy demanded. Wrong about thinking that food should be fun. Wrong about celebrating culinary traditions from every corner of this country. Wrong about refusing to make people feel bad for eating foods they grew up with, foods their grandmothers made, foods that connect them to their heritage and their history. Because if that's wrong, Kelly, then I don't want to be right. Kelly took a deep breath, visibly trying to calm herself. You're deliberately missing my point. Nobody is attacking anyone's grandmother or their heritage, but we can honor food traditions while also acknowledging that maybe we need to adapt them. Maybe we need to find ways to make them healthier. Maybe we need to think about portion sizes and frequency and balance. That's not an attack. That's evolution. Evolution, Guy repeated, his tone dripping with skepticism. Right? Because everything old is bad and everything new is better. Because the way people have been cooking for generations needs to be fixed by people who think they know better. You know what that sounds like to me? It sounds like colonialism. It sounds like gentrification. It sounds like telling people that their culture isn't good enough, that their food isn't good enough, that they need to change who they are to fit some narrow definition of what's acceptable. Kelly's mouth dropped open. Did you just compare me to a colonizer because I suggested eating vegetables? Are you serious right now? That's absurd, Guy. That's completely absurd, and you know it. Is it though? Guy pressed because I've seen it happen over and over again. A neighborhood has these amazing, authentic restaurants, family-owned places that have been there for decades, serving food that means something to the community. Then the neighborhood gentrifies, and suddenly those restaurants aren't trendy enough, aren't clean enough, aren't sophisticated enough. They get replaced by places that serve deconstructed versions of their food at triple the price. And everyone acts like that's progress. You talk about evolution like it's neutral, but it's not. It's always in the direction of making things more palatable to a certain demographic, a certain class of people who think their tastes and their values should be universal. Kelly's face was red now, her composure cracking. You are really reaching here, Guy. You're taking a simple conversation about nutrition and turning it into some grand conspiracy theory about class warfare. All I said was that your food is a lot. That's it. That's the comment that started this whole thing. And instead of just laughing it off or defending your cooking style, you've accused me of being an elitist, a snob, a colonizer, and what else? What other crimes am I guilty of for suggesting that maybe we shouldn't eat trash can nachos every day? Nobody said eat it every day. Guy shot back. That's exactly the problem with your whole argument. You take something that's meant to be enjoyed occasionally, something that's meant to be a celebration or a treat or a moment of indulgence, and you act like I'm telling people to eat it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I'm not. I've never said that. But what I am saying is that those moments matter. Those celebrations matter. And when you dismiss them as just spectacle, when you roll your eyes at the idea of people enjoying rich, flavorful food, you're dismissing something really important about human culture and human connection. Kelly threw her hands up in frustration. I'm not dismissing anything. I'm trying to have an honest conversation about the impact that food media has on people's choices. You have millions of followers, Guy. Millions of people who watch your shows and see you eating massive portions of high-calorie food. And never once mentioning that maybe that's not an everyday thing. Never once talking about moderation or balance or the fact that yes, food is about joy and connection, but it's also fuel for our bodies. It's both things. It can be both things. And I'm saying it doesn't have to be both things in every single moment, Guy responded, his voice raw with emotion. Why does every meal have to come with a disclaimer? Why does every bite have to be accompanied by guilt or justification or a reminder about heart disease? Can't we just let people enjoy things? Can't we just trust that adults are capable of making their own decisions about what they eat without celebrities and television hosts and internet nutritionists telling them they're doing it wrong? Kelly's voice softened slightly, though the tension in her shoulders remained. I hear what you're saying, Guy. I really do. And I'm not trying to be the food police, but I also think we have a responsibility, both of us, everyone with a platform, to think about the messages we're sending. And when your entire brand is built around excess, around more is more, around making everything as big and as rich and as over the top as possible, that sends a message to whether you intend it to or not. Guy was quiet for a moment, staring at the half-assembled nachos on the counter between them. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, but no less intense. You want to know what my brand is really built on, Kelly? It's built on respect. Respect for the people who cook, respect for the people who eat. Respect for the incredible diversity of American food culture. And yeah, sometimes that food is rich. Sometimes it's indulgent. Sometimes it's a fried bowlen sandwich from a diner in Ohio or a 7-LB burrito from a taco shop in San Diego. But behind every one of those dishes is a person who cares, who's trying to make a living, who's carrying on a tradition or creating something new. And when you reduce all of that to just excess, to just spectacle, you're missing the entire point. I'm not missing the point, Kelly insisted. I see the people. I appreciate the passion. But I can appreciate those things while still acknowledging that we have a cultural problem with food in this country. We eat too much. We eat too much processed food, too much sugar, too much fat, and shows like yours, Guy. They contribute to normalizing portion sizes and eating habits that are genuinely harmful. That's not an attack on you personally. That's just a fact. Guy shook his head slowly. It's not a fact. It's your opinion. And it's an opinion that ignores so many other factors. What about food deserts where people don't have access to fresh produce? What about the cost of healthy food compared to fast food? What about the fact that people are working multiple jobs and don't have time to cook from scratch every night? What about the stress and trauma and exhaustion that makes comfort food feel necessary just to get through the day? You can't just blame obesity on the fact that Guy Fieri shows people eating nachos on television. That's absurdly reductive. Kelly crossed her arms. I'm not blaming it all on you, Guy. But you're part of a larger ecosystem, and that ecosystem has consequences. And I think it's fair to ask people with platforms like yours to think about those consequences. To maybe occasionally mention that this is a special occasion food, to maybe show some vegetables on the plate. To maybe acknowledge that balance exists. I show vegetables all the time, Guy said, his frustration evident. I cook with fresh ingredients constantly. I highlight farm-to-table restaurants. I feature places that are doing innovative things with plant-based cooking, but that's not what gets clipped and shared on social media, is it? That's not what goes viral. What goes viral is me eating a huge burger or a massive sandwich because that's what people want to see. That's what gets engagement. And you know what? I'm not going to apologize for giving people a moment of joy, a moment of entertainment, a moment where they can forget about their problems and just watch someone enjoy food without judgment. Kelly's expression shifted. Something almost like understanding crossing her face. But that's exactly my point, Guy. The algorithm rewards excess. Social media rewards spectacle. And we both know that. So, doesn't that mean we should be even more intentional about what we put out there? Doesn't that mean we should push back against that instead of leaning into it? Or maybe it means we should let people have their joy where they find it, Guy replied. Maybe it means we should stop trying to police every aspect of people's lives and trust that they're smarter than we give them credit for. You think people watching my show don't know that eating a 5-pound burger isn't an everyday thing? You think they're that naive? They're not. They're watching for entertainment, for escape. For the same reason people watch cooking shows or travel shows or any kind of television. Because it's fun. Because it's interesting. Because it takes them somewhere different for half an hour. Kelly bit her lip, considering her words carefully. I think people are a smart guy. I do. But I also think we're all influenced by what we see, often in ways we don't even realize. And when excess becomes normalized, when over-the-top portions become the standard we're comparing ourselves to, that affects behavior. It affects choices. Studies show this. The research is there. The research also shows that shame doesn't work. Guy countered. The research shows that making people feel guilty about their food choices leads to disordered eating and worse health outcomes. The research shows that when you demonize certain foods, people develop unhealthy relationships with eating. So maybe, just maybe, my approach of celebrating food without judgment is actually healthier than your approach of constantly reminding people about all the ways they're doing it wrong. The studio was completely silent. Even the crew had stopped moving. This had become something neither of them had expected. A genuine philosophical debate about food, health, class, responsibility, and what it means to have a platform in modern media. Kelly looked exhausted, emotionally drained from the intensity of the exchange. Guy looked equally worn down, his usual high energy, replaced by something more somber. Kelly spoke first, her voice softer now. I don't think either of us is entirely wrong here, Guy. I think we're both coming from places of genuine concern. You care about celebrating food and honoring culinary traditions and not making people feel bad. I care about health outcomes and using platforms responsibly and being honest about nutrition. Those things aren't incompatible, but they do create tension sometimes. Guy nodded slowly, some of the fight going out of him. Yeah, I can see that. And look, I'm not saying nutrition doesn't matter. I'm not saying people shouldn't think about their health. I just think there's a way to do that without sucking all the joy out of eating, without making every meal a calculation, without turning food into the enemy. And I'm not trying to make food the enemy. Kelly said, I love food. I love cooking. I love eating, but I also lost a family member to heart disease, Guy. I've seen what unchecked health issues can do. And yeah, maybe that makes me more sensitive to these topics than some people. Maybe it makes me see danger where you see celebration, but that comes from a real place. That comes from real loss. Guy's expressions softened considerably. I'm sorry to hear that, Kelly. I really am. And I get it. I've lost people too. I've seen people struggle with their health. But I've also seen people who are so caught up in trying to be healthy that they forget how to live. Who are so worried about every bite that they can't enjoy a meal with their family. And I think there's a cost to that too. A different kind of cost, but a real one. Kelly nodded, tears visible in her eyes now. There is. You're right. There is a cost to that. And maybe the answer is somewhere in the middle. Maybe it's both. And maybe it's celebration and moderation. Maybe it's joy and awareness. Maybe it's not an etherer. Maybe Guy agreed quietly. He picked up his sunglasses from the counter and turned them over in his hands. Look, I didn't come here to fight with you, Kelly. I came here to cook some food and have some laughs and promote my restaurant. This got way more intense than either of us planned. It really did, Kelly said with a shaky laugh. My producers are probably having a heart attack right now. This was supposed to be the feel-good segment of the show. Yeah, well, Guy said, a hint of his usual smile returning. I've never been great at doing what I'm supposed to do. Kind of my whole thing. The audience, sensing the tension breaking, let out a collective breath and a few nervous laughs. Kelly walked over to the cooking station and looked down at the abandoned nachos. So, are we going to finish making these or what? Because honestly, after all that, I could really use some comfort food. Guy laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to release the remaining tension in the room. Now that I can help with, pass me that cheese sauce. If you made it this far, you just witnessed one of the most real, unscripted moments in daytime television history. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any more stories like this, and drop a comment below. Here's my question for you. Who do you think made the better points in this debate, Guy or Kelly? Let me know what you think.